The new maid stepped through the grand double doors, and the moment her rose quartz eyes met Soda's, they filled with tears.
It's really you.
The cleaning basket slipped from her grasp and clattered onto the marble, but she didn't seem to notice. Tears streamed silently down her pale cheeks as she clutched a folded, creased photo from her apron pocket.
Wait, I know those eyes.
The photograph fell from her trembling hands and landed face up on the floor. 2 children at a summer festival. Soda bent down and picked it up, his own 6-year-old face staring back at him from years he could barely recall.
Give it back, please.
She tore the photo from his hand and fled down the corridor, her sobs echoing off the walls. Soda stood alone in the sunlit foyer, the fallen basket at his feet, his mind spinning with unanswered questions. He stared at the creased photograph. The black-haired boy in the blue yukata was unmistakably him at age 6.
But who is the pink-haired girl beside me? And why is she crying over a photo of us?
He strode through the corridor to the staff quarters and knocked firmly on her door. Inside, Hina sat on the bed, clutching the photo to her heart, her sobs muffled by the closed door.
She's in there, falling apart, and I'm standing here holding a puzzle I can't solve.
He retreated to the living room, the photo still in his hand as dusk settled into night outside the windows.
She recognized me the moment she saw my face. There's a history here I can't remember.
Hours later, he lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the photograph resting on the nightstand. Down the hall, Hina remained curled on her bed, the moonlight glistening on her tear-streaked cheeks. The mystery hung in the darkness, its weight pressing against the silence of the sleeping estate. The morning light spilled through the high windows of the living room. Soda entered to find Hina already standing by the table, a silver breakfast tray balanced in her hands. She set the tray down without a single glance his way, her movements so precise they felt rehearsed.
Good morning, Master Soda. I have prepared your breakfast as requested.
Not a trace of yesterday's tears. She's wearing the uniform like armor.
He drew breath to speak, but before a syllable left his lips, the teapot was already tilting, amber liquid filling the cup.
I took the liberty of brewing sencha. If the strength isn't to your liking, I can prepare another pot.
Hina, about last night.
If you'll excuse me, I must attend to the kitchen.
In the kitchen, she scrubbed a pot already clean, her back rigid and turned, her reflection a haunted mask in the window.
She's scared. And whatever it is, it's tied to that photograph and to me.
Soda found her in the corridor, arms full of fresh linens. He stepped directly into her path.
Please let me pass. I have duties to attend.
Not until you answer me. Why did you have that photograph? Why did you cry?
Hina's face drained of color. Her knuckles whitened around the apron's front fold.
I can't. I've been told never to speak of it, to anyone.
Told by whom? Who would command a stranger to carry my childhood photo and then stay silent?
She only shook her head, a single tear slipping down her cheek, and whispered a refusal. Before he could press further, she ducked under his arm and fled down the hallway. Soda stood frozen, the echo of her footsteps fading into a silence heavier than the one before.
A promise she's terrified to break. And now I'm certain someone else is at the center of this.
He retreated to the study, the weight of the unanswered questions pressing down on him. A call to the agency revealed nothing: flawless credentials, a sealed file, and a curt refusal to elaborate.
Even the agency acts like she's a mystery they're not allowed to solve.
He sank into the leather chair, the afternoon sun catching the oil painting of his grandfather above the mantel. The portrait's eyes held a quiet amusement, as if the old man still pulled strings from beyond.
Grandfather's last words to me, right here in this study. Promise me you'll look after the people Yuki loved.
At the time, it had seemed a sentimental request, nothing more. But now the words tangled with the pink-haired maid who'd cried at the sight of him.
Could Hina be someone Yuki loved? And if so, why is she hiding it? There's a missing piece. Yuki is at the center of this, I'm sure.
Sota placed the photograph on the stone bench in the rose garden, a deliberate test he needed her to fail. When Hina came to tend the roses, she halted mid-step, her face draining of color. Wordlessly, she picked it up, retreated to her sparse room, and pressed it to her chest. That evening, from the shadowed terrace, Sota watched her return to the garden alone. She sat on the bench, the photograph cradled in trembling hands, and began to whisper,
Yuki, I miss you so much, every day.
The name struck Sota like a physical blow. Yuki, his late sister.
So she knew Yuki. This entire mystery circles back to my own family.
He watched the pink-haired maid clutch the photograph like a lifeline, her grief an echo of his own. He withdrew into the shadows before she could notice him, the truth settling in with the chill of evening. The next morning, Sota found her in the garden, the photo still clutched against her chest.
I heard you last night, Hina. You whispered my sister's name.
No, you couldn't have heard that. It's not possible.
She tried to rise, but he gently caught her wrist, forcing her to face him.
I promised Yuki I'd never tell anyone, especially her brother.
You knew Yuki? How? Where?
The words spilled out between sobs. She and Yuki shared a hospital room for months. They were 7.
I'm the one who wasn't supposed to survive. If my presence hurts you, I'll leave today.
Leave? You're the only link I have to her final days. I won't let you disappear.
She looked at him then, eyes drowning in a decade of silence, and nodded. Not acceptance, but a temporary reprieve. The fragile truce with Hina left Sota with more questions than answers. He reached for the phone on his study desk.
Mr. Tanaka, I need you to look into Hina, the new maid. Her full history, discreetly.
The family lawyer arrived the following morning, his worn briefcase carrying documents that would reshape everything.
Young master, she attended a top hospitality academy, all expenses paid by an anonymous donor.
Anonymous? Someone invested deeply in her future. But why?
Tanaka laid a yellowed hospital record beside the scholarship file, the dates stark and undeniable.
She was admitted to the children's ward the very same month as Yuki. They shared the same corridor.
Same hospital, same time. This was planned. But by whom?
The 2 men sat in the lamplight of the study, the air thick with a decade-old secret.
Dig deeper, Tanaka. Find whoever paid for her schooling. I need to know who's been pulling strings.
Later that afternoon, Sota found Hina in the living room, a feather duster still in her hand.
Hina, I need to ask you something, in private.
She followed him to the corridor, her back straight, eyes already guarded.
The scholarship that paid for your school. Who was the donor?
I told you, I don't know. It was anonymous.
Anonymous gifts always come with conditions. What did they want in return?
Her knuckles whitened around the duster. She shook her head and stepped back. By evening, the housekeeper and the gardener exchanged low whispers in the kitchen about the young master's relentless scrutiny. Sota, alone in the living room, felt the weight of the estate's silence pressing in.
She's hiding more than just a name, but every question pushes her further away.
Sota returned to the study that night, the house silent, his mind unwilling to rest. He pulled open a locked drawer in the antique desk, untouched since his grandfather's death. Inside lay a yellowed envelope, elegant calligraphy spelling out a name he knew well.
That handwriting, I've seen it before. The scholarship file, it was written by the same hand.
He spread the envelope beside the scholarship documents. The strokes matched perfectly. The envelope contained a property deed and a map, a small cottage on the edge of the estate, once a convalescent home for children. A note in the margin read, "For Yuki's garden. May it always bloom with laughter."
All this time, grandfather was behind everything. The scholarship, the hospital, it was all planned. He arranged for Hina to be here, But why? What did he want me to do?
He clutched the deed, the weight of his grandfather's unseen hand settling heavily on his shoulders. The next morning, Sota followed the old map through overgrown paths to a corner of the estate he'd never seen. A wooden plaque hung askew above the door, carved with fading letters, Yuki's Haven. The warped door groaned open into a single dusty room, a child's drawing still pinned to the wall. On a shelf sat a worn photo album, its spine cracked, a dried pink ribbon marking a page. He opened it, photographs of Hina and Yuki side by side, brushing each other's hair, reading, frail but smiling.
Grandfather captured every moment. He was watching over them from the shadows.
Tucked inside the album's back cover was a sealed letter, his name in his grandfather's elegant script.
After my death, then, he planned this moment down to the day.
He slid the letter into his coat, the paper heavy with truths he couldn't yet unseal. He left the cottage, but the plaque's words followed him back through the trees, Yuki's Haven. He found her in the living room, dusting the mantelpiece in the late afternoon light.
I visited Yuki's Haven. There was this.
Her hands trembled as she opened the cover, and the color drained from her face.
Where did you get this? These are from the hospital.
She sank onto the sofa, clutching the album, and the words tumbled out.
Yuki was my only friend. We shared a room for months. She made me promise to live.
In the dusty ward, the two girls giggled over a comic, an IV stand casting a long shadow.
The photograph was taken the day you visited. Your grandfather brought you to the festival.
But Sota stared at the snapshot, his own 6-year-old self a complete stranger to his memory.
I don't remember any of it. That day is just a blank.
They moved to the garden bench, the photo album still between them, dusk settling around the roses. In the hospital, after Yuki's bed was emptied, young Hina stared out the rain-streaked window, utterly alone.
After I was discharged, a group home took me. Then a letter came, offering to pay for a top school. No name, just a promise. I always thought it was someone consumed by guilt over Yuki's death. A doctor, a nurse, I never dared to ask.
Not guilt. Grandfather was steering her life, and he never told her. You never wanted to know who it was?
I was terrified the money would stop if I pried, so I just accepted it.
If I tell her now, this fragile piece will shatter. She'll see herself as a puppet.
He swallowed the truth, the silence between them stretching into a breathless pause. She didn't press, only leaned back, eyes closed, the evening breeze stirring her pink hair. The days turned into a quiet rhythm. Their walks through the rose garden became the only space where truths didn't need to be spoken aloud. Hina's laughter arrived without warning one afternoon, a small wind chime sound that made Sota freeze mid-step.
She's coming back to life right in front of me, and I'm still hiding the one thing that could destroy it.
Yuki used to say that if she could reach the stars, she'd pluck the brightest one and wear it in her hair.
They traded fragments, his sister's favorite stuffed bear, the song Hina sang through the hospital nights. Then, without warning, an image surfaced in Sota's mind, a paper lantern spinning, his sister's tiny hand in his, and the scent of cotton candy.
You remembered something. Your eyes, they've gone somewhere far away.
The festival. I could hear the ringing of the goldfish scoops, my grandfather's voice telling me to smile.
That was the first time I saw you smile. I remember thinking, so that's Yuki's brother.
The moment was so fragile, Sota could almost hear it crack. The unopened letter sat in his study drawer, but tonight he only watched her smile and said nothing. That night in the study, the fragments crystallized, a summer festival, a goldfish scoop, his grandfather's hand on his shoulder. Young Sota, in his blue yukata, stood before the goldfish stall, paper net tearing but his grin unwavering. Grandfather knelt beside him, voice warm but deliberate. "That girl over there, she's Yuki's friend. Go make her smile."
I marched right up to her, holding out a cotton candy like a peace offering. She looked so fragile, like spun sugar herself.
Then the camera clicked. 3 children, festival lanterns blurry in the background, Yuki's tiny hand gripping both of theirs. And through the noise, his grandfather's voice cut clear. "You'll understand why this matters when you're older." The memory released Sota like a held breath. He stared at the creased photo on his desk, the sealed letter beside it.
He planned it from that day. Grandfather chose Hina for me before I even knew her name.
His fingers brushed the sealed envelope, his name in elegant calligraphy still unbroken.
I can't keep this from her much longer, but once I open it, there's no going back.
The next afternoon, Hina found him in the living room, staring at the empty fireplace.
You've been somewhere else all day. Is it more memories?
Just pieces. Things I should have held on to.
Whatever you're holding, I'm grateful. This place, you've given me a reason to stop running.
Her fingers brushed the back of his hand, a gesture so light it could have been an accident, but it wasn't.
She's thanking me for a prison my own grandfather built, and I'm letting her.
Yuki once told me her brother was the kind of person who'd save a spider from a rain puddle. I think she was right.
Every kind word she says will turn into a blade the moment I open that letter.
They sat in the afternoon quiet, her hand still resting against his, the space between them filled with things neither said. Soda's heartbeat counted the seconds to a confession he wasn't ready to make. Before dawn on the anniversary of Yuki's death, Soda found Hina in the rose garden, kneeling in the dew, a bundle of white chrysanthemums in her hands.
Will you come with me to visit her? I've never had anyone to stand beside at her grave.
They walked through the morning mist to the family plot, an old cherry tree shading the small gray stone. At the grave, Hina pulled the creased photograph from her pocket and turned it over. For the first time, Soda saw his sister's face.
Yuki. I'd almost forgotten the exact shape of her smile.
This right here. This is the only family I ever had.
She carried our family in her pocket for a decade, while I locked mine away.
I used to talk to her photo every night, just so I wouldn't forget the sound of her laugh.
They laid the chrysanthemums on the stone, the 3 children in the photograph watching in silence. The photograph had 3 children again, but only 2 stood to remember. Soda's knees hit the cold earth. The sound that escaped him was raw, a decade overdue. Hina knelt beside him, her arms wrapping around his shoulders as he wept.
It's okay. Let it out. I've been holding her for you for 10 years.
I didn't even cry at her funeral. I was too scared to fall apart.
Hina's voice was steady, but her tears soaked into his coat.
Yuki made me promise the night before she left. She said, if you ever meet my big brother, take care of him for me. So I became a maid. I searched for years. When I saw you in the foyer, I couldn't believe it.
All this time, she was honoring a promise to a ghost. And I've been suspecting her.
He pulled back, his face wet, and looked at her as if seeing her for the first time. The photograph lay on the grave, 3 children and a promise finally kept. They walked back through the morning mist, the estate emerging from the gray like a held breath.
She deserves the whole truth. But if I tell her now, I'll break something that just started to heal.
They settled onto the garden bench, the photograph now tucked back into her pocket like a relic.
If the promise wasn't there, if Yuki had never asked, would you still want to stay?
I don't know. The promise is the only reason I've had for anything.
She built her entire identity on a 7-year-old's dying whisper. That's not a purpose. It's a cage.
Her fingers curled into her apron, the same way they had the day she arrived.
If I expose the grandfather's manipulation now, she'll feel like a puppet. I have to free her first.
They sat without speaking, the silence a mirror of the one that had followed Hina into the foyer, except now it was shared. Soda walked into the study alone, the weight of the morning's grief still clinging to his shoulders. He opened the drawer where the sealed letter had waited, his grandfather's perfect calligraphy staring up at him.
This letter holds the final piece. If I open it, everything I know about Hina will change.
He sat at the desk, the envelope turning in his hands, when the door hinges creaked behind him.
Forgive the intrusion. I brought your tea.
Her eyes landed on the letter in his hands, and the tray rattled.
That handwriting, it's the same as the scholarship letters.
Her face went paper white, the tray slipping from her fingers and crashing to the floor.
Who sent that? Tell me, Soda.
Soda's knuckles whitened around the envelope. The truth stood in the doorway, demanding an answer he wasn't ready to give.
My grandfather was your sponsor. He paid your school, arranged your hire. All of it, from the start.
Your grandfather? For 10 years, my whole life mapped by a stranger's guilt?
She reeled backward, her spine hitting the bookshelf, the betrayal of physical force.
And you knew all along. You've been watching me stumble around like a puppet.
I didn't know, Hina. I only discovered the truth a few days ago. You have to believe me.
He reached for her arm, but she jerked back as if his fingers were hot iron.
Don't touch me. Stay away. I won't be anyone's charity case.
The door crashed shut, and her footsteps pounded down the hall like a retreating heartbeat.
And now she's gone, and I'm still clenching a sealed letter I'm terrified to open.
Before dawn, a single sheet of paper waited on the foyer table, written in Hina's careful hand. I can't stay. Please don't look for me. Hina. He bolted through the corridors, the staff quarters silent, her bed stripped to the mattress. He scoured the cottage, then drove back under a gray sky, the truth a splinter he couldn't remove.
She vanished without a trace. I've lost her, and the promise I never asked of her.
The doorbell rang. Mr. Tanaka entered without a word, a worn leather folder tucked beneath his arm. In the study, Tanaka's voice was flat. I've found the final document your grandfather left. It answers everything.
Then speak. I've waited long enough for the truth.
Tanaka untied the folder's ribbon and laid a single yellowed sheet on the desk, the calligraphy unmistakable. The lawyer drew a breath, and Soda's world narrowed to the ink on that page. Tanaka began to read, his steady voice cutting through the study's stale air. My dear Soda, after Yuki passed, I tracked the small, pink-haired girl who had been her only friend. I paid for her schooling in secret. In my will, I instructed that she be hired as your maid. I hoped the two of you might find in each other the comfort I could never give.
From a hospital room to my own foyer, every step she took, he mapped.
But my greatest regret is that I trapped her in my design. If she ever wishes to leave, release her without hesitation.
Even from the grave, he's asking me to free her.
Give her back the choice Yuki never had. That is my final request.
He loved her enough to set her free. I have to do what he couldn't.
Soda looked up, the path ahead unlit but no longer invisible. He drove through the gray afternoon, the letter in his pocket, to the small station where a single train waited. Hina sat on a bench, her small suitcase at her feet, pink hair hidden under a cap, staring at the tracks.
Hina.
She flinched, then turned her face away, as if he were a ghost she'd already banished.
Please listen. My grandfather orchestrated everything from the start. The school, your hire, even the cottage.
So I truly was a puppet. Every choice I thought I'd made was someone else's decision.
I didn't know any of it. I only discovered the truth yesterday. I swear.
How do I believe a single word from you? This entire family has lied to me for 10 years.
The train's whistle shrieked, a sound like something tearing. Soda's voice died in his throat. There was nothing left to say, and she had already turned toward the carriage door. Hina stepped onto the train without a backward glance, the doors hissing shut behind her. The train lurched forward, its wheels swallowing the distance, leaving Soda rooted to the platform. He stood there long after the last carriage vanished, the gray sky pressing down like a verdict. The drive back was a blur. When he stepped into the foyer, the silence hit him like a physical blow. No hum of a duster, no clink of a tea tray, just the hollow echo of his own footsteps on marble.
She's really gone. This house has never felt so empty.
The grandfather's letter, still crumpled in his pocket, seemed to burn through the fabric.
I can't drag her back. Not with guilt, not with obligation. She has to choose for herself.
The house settled into a silence that felt like stone, but Soda's mind was already turning towards something else. Soda pulled a stack of leather-bound diaries from the locked drawer, his grandfather's handwriting filling every page.
He documented everything. Trade deals, estate plans, but these last pages are different.
Beneath the sketch, 2 words were underlined 3 times: Yuki's house. The notes described a pediatric convalescent home, a garden for recovery, a dream he abandoned after Yuki's death.
He didn't just manipulate, he was trying to finish something love started. Twisted, but not hollow.
He unfolded the old deed for the cottage, the marginalia matching the diary, the same lotus-patterned border, the same ink.
A charity, not a cage. A place where kids like Yuki and Hina could heal without debt.
In his mind, the dusty cottage transformed. Bright rooms, laughter, a cherry tree like the one at the grave.
If I can't bring Hina back with words, maybe this place can.
The scratch of nib on paper filled the silence as he began drafting what would become the Yuki House Foundation. Within weeks, Soda converted the cottage into the Yuki House Foundation's first office, the old plaque polished to gold. A small staff moved in, and the first donations came, his inheritance transformed from a burden into a promise. Soda sat at the new desk and wrote a letter in his own hand, the ink steady but his heartbeat unsteady.
If she reads this, she'll know it's not charity. It's a chance to build something on her own terms.
He mailed it to her last known address, a small boarding house in a coastal town, then waited. Days turned into weeks. The cottage bustled with activity, but the mailbox remained empty of her reply.
Maybe she threw it away. Maybe she never even opened it.
But he kept the charity running, the children's laughter now echoing where dust once settled. At night, he sat alone with the photograph, waiting for a sign that she had found her own way back. 1 month later, a lone figure stood at the estate gate, pink hair gleaming in the early sunlight. It was Hina.
She's back. After all these silent weeks, she actually came.
She looked thinner, but her rose quartz eyes held a steadiness that hadn't been there before.
I got your letter. I came to see what you've built. Nothing more.
Soda nodded and led her down the winding path, past the roses that had witnessed their first tears. The cottage came into view, the cherry tree sapling heavy with blossoms, the sign Yuki's house catching the light.
Yuki's house.
He pushed the door open. The air inside smelled of fresh paint, lavender, and something that felt like hope. Hina walked through slowly, her fingers brushing the small beds and the children's drawings pinned to the wall.
This is what he meant to give. Not a cage, a garden where the likes of Yuki could heal.
Soda opened the back door of the cottage, and a swirl of cherry blossom petals drifted into the room.
I want you to manage Yuki's house, Hina. Not as a maid, not as a favor, as someone who understands what this place means. This isn't charity. It's a partnership. You can walk away right now, or you can build it with me.
He's offering me a choice. No one has ever allowed me that.
She looked at the blossoms, her pink hair catching the petals like snowflakes.
Say yes, and it's yours. Say no, and I'll never ask again. The decision is yours alone.
Can I really say yes to something for myself? Not for Yuki, not for a debt, just for me.
Their eyes met, and the silence was a bridge between who she'd been and who she might become. The chapel bell tolled once across the estate, but Hina's answer remained unspoken. The silence stretched, then Hina's voice cut through, barely a whisper.
I always thought I had to be useful. That if I wasn't needed, I was a burden.
She reached out and took the keys from Soda's palm, the metal cool against her trembling fingers.
I'll try. Not because Yuki asked me to, but because I want to.
A shaky smile broke across her face, the first that belonged entirely to her.
Welcome back, Hina. Not as my maid, but as yourself.
She looked at the keys, then at the cottage, the cherry blossoms swirling as if celebrating. For the first time, the photograph in her pocket felt like a gift, not a tether.
Thank you for giving me back my choice.
They stood under the cherry tree, the keys between them, a new chapter beginning. Months turned Yuki's house into a sanctuary of small voices and bright drawings, Hina's gentle hand guiding every corner. Children called her by her first name, and she answered with a warmth that seemed to heal her own unseen wounds.
She was always this person just buried under years of someone else's script.
Soda came often, not to inspect, but to walk the gardens with her, their silences fuller than speech. One evening, as the cottage emptied, she took the creased photograph from her pocket.
It's time this had a proper home.
She placed it in a simple wooden frame on the wall, beside a crayon drawing of a cherry tree by a young patient.
Now everyone who comes here will see the three of us. Yuki won't be forgotten.
The photograph caught the last light of evening, the children's smiles as bright as the day they were taken. The evening after the photo was framed, Soda found Hina alone on the garden bench, the same one where she had first whispered Yuki's name.
I want you to come back to the main estate, not as staff, but as my partner. I'm in love with you, Hina.
Her eyes widened, and for a breath she was motionless. Then a laugh, light, disbelieving, bubbled up from her chest.
You're really telling me this now? I've been in love with you since I was 7 years old. But I needed to find myself first. I had to become someone who wasn't defined by a promise.
She took his hand, her fingers fitting perfectly between his.
So yes, Soda, I'll come home. Not as your maid, not as your manager, but as yours.
Soda pressed his forehead to hers, their breathing sinking as the first fireflies sparkled in the darkening garden. Beyond them, through the cottage window, the framed photograph of 3 children glowed in the last light. A promise born from grief had finally become a choice born of love. 6 years passed. The estate foyer now held 2 photographs side by side, a wedding portrait and the creased festival photo. The old photograph, still creased, smiled out from a simple wooden frame beside a spray of white chrysanthemums. Yuki's house had grown into a renowned pediatric care center, its gardens ringing with the laughter of children. Inside, a wall of artworks surrounded a small painting signed Yuki, a permanent reminder of the girl who inspired it all.
We made it, Yuki. We kept our promise.
Soda joined her, his hand finding its familiar place on her shoulder.
Welcome home, Hina.
She turned, and there was no trace of the maid who had once collapsed in tears in this very spot. Upstairs, the grandfather's portrait seemed to smile, his final wish fulfilled beyond his dreams. One morning, early sunlight flooded the foyer, catching the glass of the 2 photographs on the wall. Hina paused before them, her pink hair loose over a simple sweater, her reflection a ghost in the frame. Soda found her there, and for a moment he simply watched from the doorway. He crossed the marble floor and rested his hands on her shoulders, saying nothing. Their eyes met in the glass, his brown, her rose quartz, and no words were needed. The festival photograph caught the light, and the children's smiles seemed warmer, as if they were laughing again. A sunbeam traced the frame, and Yuki's tiny hand seemed to reach out from the image. Hina's hand rose to cover his, her wedding band glinting. She leaned back into him, and for a long while they simply stood, breathing in the quiet. The foyer, once a stage for tears and revelations, held only peace now. The photograph did not capture a moment of loss. It framed the first chapter of a love 15 years in the making. In that single image, 3 children smiled, unaware of the grief and grace that would follow. A promise made in a sterile hospital room, carried through years of solitude, was finally answered. A grandfather's secret hope, born from loss, became a living garden where children heal. Yuki's tiny hand in the photograph seems to wave, a quiet blessing from beyond. Now, in the foyer, the photo hangs beside a wedding portrait, the circle complete. The morning light catches the glass, and for a breath, the children laugh again. Hina and Soda have walked away, but the photograph remains, a testament to love that endures. The house is still. The photo glows, and the story, like the light, lingers on.